What if the very thing holding you back was your need to control everything? What if desire, when gripped too tightly, slips right through your fingers? The Stoics knew this long before modern psychology caught up. They didn't chase, they aligned. They didn't strive, they acted in harmony with nature. And by doing less, they received more. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." But we've been taught the opposite, that to get what we want, we must fight for it, chase it, plan it, and push against the current of life. And yet, the Stoics observed that the tighter you clench your fist, the less you're able to hold. There's a certain power in letting go, not of ambition, not of purpose, but of the illusion that you can command outcomes. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, but even he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. What we chase often eludes us, not because it's unattainable, but because we're gripping too hard, trying to force what must flow. The Stoics didn't abandon desire, they purified it. They didn't suppress ambition, they refined it into something sustainable, something noble. Imagine living in a way where your sense of self-worth isn't tied to results, but to your response. Where your peace doesn't depend on the world behaving as you wish, but on how you show up regardless of its chaos. That is Stoic detachment. It's not apathy. It's freedom. When you let go of needing, you begin to attract. Not in the mystical sense, but in the very real sense that people are drawn to presence, to confidence, to those who are whole within themselves. A person who does not need approval gains influence. A person who does not need power gains respect. Seneca warned us of this addiction to control. He said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." The one who lets go isn't giving up. He's stepping back, observing the battlefield of life without getting caught in the chaos. It's there, in that quiet observation, that clarity arises. When you stop chasing, you start noticing. When you stop grasping, your hands are finally free to receive. So the question isn't, how do I get what I want? The real question is, who am I when I no longer crave it? And as you settle into that silence, as you make peace with uncertainty, with imperfection, with the unfolding of things beyond your command, something shifts. The world begins to reflect your inner stillness. Not because you forced it to, but because you aligned with the timeless truth that what is meant for you cannot miss you, and what misses you was never yours to begin with. And in that surrender, in that deep-rooted trust in the flow of life, a quiet confidence emerges. This is not the loud, arrogant confidence that demands to be seen. No. This is the kind of confidence that speaks through stillness, through presence, through unwavering calm amid noise. The Stoics cultivated this not by accident, but through relentless practice, the daily discipline of detaching from what does not serve the soul. They practiced premeditatio malorum, imagining what could go wrong, not to live in fear, but to build resilience. To greet loss with grace. To welcome uncertainty as a teacher, not a threat. Because when you no longer fear outcomes, you become unshakable. You no longer live in the illusion that you are owed anything by the world. You give your best, not for the guarantee of reward, but because it is who you are. That's character. That's virtue. And in the Stoic worldview, that is the only true wealth. A man who lets go of the fruit becomes free to enjoy the labor. A mind no longer gripped by what if finds peace in what is. And when you find peace in the now, you become magnetic, not because you manipulate, but because authenticity speaks louder than effort ever could. It's in your silence that people hear you the most. It's in your detachment that your power becomes visible. And it's in your surrender that everything you once chased begins to appear, not forced, not begged for, but drawn in by the gravity of your stillness. The world bends for the one who no longer seeks to bend it. So don't confuse passivity with wisdom. The Stoic does not sit idle. He moves with purpose, but lets go of entitlement to results. He acts, but is not attached. He loves, but is not owned by love. He builds, but is not broken by loss. Because he knows, everything borrowed by time will one day return to time. So, let go, not to abandon, but to realign. Because when you no longer need the world to give you something, you're finally ready to receive it. And that, perhaps, is the most profound paradox of all. It is within that paradox that the Stoic lives. Not torn between extremes, but balanced upon the razor's edge of acceptance and action. He walks through life as if it were a garden, tending to what he can, his thoughts, his choices, his virtue, and releasing what he cannot, the rain, the seasons, the harvest. This way of being isn't passive, it's powerful. It's the calm that unnerves the storm. It's the man who, while all others are grasping and screaming for control, stands unmoved. Not because he is indifferent, but because he is rooted in something deeper than desire. Desire fades. Control slips. But character endures. And in the quiet chambers of the mind where Stoicism lives, one discovers that peace was never out there, waiting to be earned or achieved. It was always within, buried beneath layers of fear, expectation, and noise. When you no longer need life to unfold in a certain way, you unlock a hidden door. You begin to see that much of what you once wanted wasn't truly yours. It was borrowed from the world, inherited from fear, or demanded by ego. And when you return those illusions, when you burn them in the quiet fire of introspection, what remains is simple, and yet more powerful than anything you imagined. Clarity, purpose, freedom. And it is this freedom that draws life toward you. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to no longer be ruled by your wants. The freedom to stand in the middle of chaos and remain undisturbed. The freedom to act from principle, not pressure. To choose virtue over validation. Depth over distraction. As you walk this path, you may notice something strange. What you once chased now moves toward you. What you once feared now feels like an ally. What you once clung to no longer has power over you. This is the Stoic gift. To be untouched by the storms of life, not because they don't exist, but because you no longer place your peace in their hands. And slowly, day by day, you become that rare thing in the world, a human being who needs nothing, and so attracts everything. You attract not because you reach, but because you radiate. People sense it. They're drawn to the calm that surrounds you, the quiet depth in your eyes, the unwavering steadiness in your steps. You become a mirror, not reflecting their chaos, but revealing their yearning for stillness. Without saying a word, you remind them of what they've lost, a sense of grounding, an unshakable center, a life unchained from endless craving. This is not charisma. This is presence. And presence is the natural byproduct of letting go. When you stop grasping at the moment, you begin to embody it. When you stop reaching for the next thing, you become enough. And in being enough, you become rare. In a world obsessed with more, the man who is content becomes a mystery. In a culture that glorifies excess, the one who walks away without bitterness holds real power. This is what the Stoics understood, that a meaningful life doesn't come from chasing what is fleeting, but from standing firm in what is eternal. Courage, temperance, wisdom, justice. These are not strategies for success, they are the compass for the soul. And when followed, they bring about something more valuable than pleasure, more enduring than fame, more fulfilling than achievement. Harmony. You begin to live in rhythm with nature, not the trees and rivers, but the deeper nature of existence. A life not against the tide, but with it. A life where you no longer force, you allow. You no longer demand, you welcome. And what comes to you in this state, whether joy or pain, gain or loss, is received with open hands, not because you are cold or numb, but because you are wise enough to know that nothing lasts and strong enough to know you will endure. So let go. Not once, but daily. Let go of the fear, the pressure, the timeline, the narrative. Let go of the need to prove, to impress, to win. Let go and return to yourself. Because what you're truly seeking is not out there. It never was. It is here, behind the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the craving. It is the quiet center of you, the part that needs nothing, and therefore has everything. And once you touch that center, truly feel it, not as a concept, not as something read in a book, but as a living truth pulsing beneath your skin, you begin to move through the world differently. No longer do you rush to fill silences. No longer do you react to every slight, every rejection, every shift in fortune. You observe. You choose. You act, not from impulse, but from intention. And this is the beginning of mastery. Not mastery over others, but over the self. The Stoics never promised a life free of pain. In fact, they warned us that pain is inevitable. Loved ones will be lost. Plans will fall apart. Seasons of joy will come and go. But in the midst of it all, there remains one constant, your response. That is your kingdom. That is your power. You begin to see that true manifestation isn't about bending the world to your will. It's about shaping your will so well, so purely, that the world no longer holds you hostage. When your peace is no longer dependent on circumstance, when your worth is no longer tied to outcome, that is when the universe begins to respond. Not with miracles, not with fantasies, but with alignment. You find yourself in the right place at the right time, not because of luck, but because your inner world is no longer in conflict with reality. You stop resisting what is, and in doing so, you become deeply powerful, not by force, but by harmony. Opportunities unfold, not because you grasped at them, but because you were ready. People arrive, not because you chased them, but because your stillness called to them. Peace settles, not because life is perfect, but because you no longer demand that it be. And here, finally, you see what the Stoics meant when they said that fortune favors the prepared mind. Because when the winds change, as they always do, it's not the one who shouts at the storm who survives. It's the one who, having let go of the need for control, adjusts his sails and moves forward, silently, steadily, freely. And that man, the one who lets go, who surrenders the chase, who lives by virtue, who acts without clinging, he attracts everything, not because he asks for it, but because he no longer needs it. And so, without need, he becomes needful. Without pursuit, he becomes pursued. For the world begins to offer its treasures to the one who has stopped begging for them, to the man who can walk away without bitterness, who can smile in solitude, who can stand in the center of his own life without requiring applause. This kind of soul doesn't speak loudly, yet his presence is unmistakable. He doesn't boast of wisdom, yet people come to him for clarity. He doesn't command loyalty, yet loyalty follows him, quietly and fiercely. There's a gravity in letting go, a strange and sacred magnetism. Because when your value no longer depends on validation, you step outside of the transactional nature of the world. You cease to barter your peace for attention. You cease to trade your integrity for acceptance. And in that stillness, in that unshakable essence, people feel something rare, a human being who is whole. Not perfect, not detached in arrogance, but grounded, present, free. Free from the tyranny of more. Free from the hunger to prove. Free from the endless comparison that corrodes the soul. You begin to notice beauty again, in small things. The way sunlight filters through the window. The quiet rhythm of your breath. The peace that comes not from what you own, but from what you've released. You begin to live slower, not because you are lazy, but because you are no longer in a race. You stop chasing time, because you are no longer afraid of missing something. You realize you were never behind. You were just distracted. And now that the noise has settled, now that your grip has loosened, now that you've stopped trying to mold life into what it never promised to be, you're finally present for what it is. A gift. A teacher. A mirror. Not always kind. Not always fair. But always real. And what's real, even if painful, is always more nourishing than the illusion. So you carry on, not faster, but deeper. Not louder, but clearer. Not grander, but truer. And the world around you begins to mirror that shift. Not immediately. Not all at once. But steadily, faithfully, as if it too was waiting for you to finally stop and see. To see that you were never separate from what you sought. That what you were trying to manifest was never out there. It was simply waiting behind the silence, for you to become still enough to receive it. And as you move through your days with this newfound ease, something else quietly transforms: your relationship with time. It no longer feels like an enemy to outrun or a commodity to hoard, but a partner in your journey. You begin to honor the moments between tasks, the spaces between breaths, recognizing that life's richest wisdom often arrives in the pauses. You discover that true accomplishment is not measured by the volume of your victories, but by the depth of your presence. A single sentence spoken with sincerity can resonate deeper than 1,000 hollow words. A solitary act of kindness offered without expectation can ripple outward more profoundly than a grand gesture performed for acclaim. And in this unfolding, you realize that the Stoic path isn't a destination. It's a constant return. A daily practice of noticing where you still clutch too tightly, where you still demand too much, where you still let fear whisper directions. Each time you catch yourself grasping, each time you feel the old urge to control, you invite yourself back into the center, back into that silent well of being that needs nothing. This self-correction becomes your meditation. Not the closed eyes kind, but the open-hearted vigilance of living deliberately. You ask yourself, in every moment, am I acting from need or from purpose? Am I speaking to be heard or to convey truth? Am I moving toward virtue or fleeing discomfort? It is in these questions that the journey continues. For the Stoic road is never fully traveled, it merely deepens. And so you walk on, unburdened by the chase, unfettered by outcome. You continue to plant intentions rather than expectations. You water them with patience rather than anxiety. You watch them grow in time, often in forms you never predicted, always in ways that serve the whole rather than the self. In this way, you become a gardener of the soul, tending quietly, releasing freely, harvesting gently. And in every seed you plant, in every hand you extend, the invitation is implicit. Come, taste the stillness. Come, rest in the present. Come, discover that everything you've ever sought has been seeking you all along. And so the story goes on. And so the story goes on, not in grand climaxes or sudden revelations, but in subtle shifts, in quiet revolutions that take place within. You begin to notice that you no longer argue with life. You listen to it. You no longer wrestle with what should be. You meet what is, with grace. This doesn't mean you've given up ambition, or that you don't care. On the contrary, you care more deeply now, but differently. You're no longer consumed by the end. You are invested in the process, in the refinement of self through every moment, every trial, every ordinary day. And there is power in the ordinary when you live this way. A morning walk becomes sacred. A conversation becomes purposeful. Silence becomes a companion, not an emptiness to be filled. The world slows to meet you, or perhaps it was never rushing at all. You were. The old restlessness begins to dissolve. That constant itch to be somewhere else, someone else, doing something more, fades. What replaces it is not complacency, but clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't need to shout. It simply knows. You no longer look at success the same way. It's no longer measured by trophies or applause. It's measured in inner stillness, in how quickly you return to center when the world pulls you off balance, in how gracefully you can lose something without losing yourself. And in this stillness, a deeper kind of joy arises. A joy not dependent on circumstance, but born from integrity, from alignment, from knowing you are exactly where you need to be, because you have stopped demanding that life be anything other than what it is. You begin to live in communion with reality instead of conflict with it. And this is where true manifestation begins, not from want, but from wholeness, not from desperation, but from still, steady intention. You give because you are full, not empty. You serve because you are anchored, not because you are trying to earn your place. And strangely, or perhaps inevitably, life begins to respond. Doors open. Not always the ones you expected, but the ones you are ready for. People arrive. Not always the ones you hoped for, but the ones your soul needs. Events unfold. Not always as planned, but always with purpose, revealing what you are ready to see, shaping who you are ready to become. Because now, you are ready to receive. Not with clenched fists, but with open hands. Not with anxious urgency, but with quiet certainty. And so, the path continues, not toward something, but deeper into something. Into yourself. Into truth. Into peace. The kind of peace that doesn't need explanation. The kind of peace that lives in the core of every Stoic teaching. The kind of peace that, once found, cannot be taken, only shared. And that is how you attract everything. By needing nothing. By letting go. By simply becoming. The story doesn't end. It deepens. And as it deepens, so do you. You begin to see life less as a series of events to control and more as a canvas, one you don't fully own, but are invited to paint with sincerity. Every thought becomes a brushstroke. Every action, a color. And the more you release attachment to the final image, the more beautifully it unfolds. What once felt like struggle now feels like shaping. What once felt like resistance now feels like refinement. You are no longer at war with life, you are in conversation with it. Each moment becomes a dialogue. You show up with presence, life responds with grace. You act with courage, life reveals clarity. You move with humility, life returns depth. And it is here, in this sacred dialogue, that you begin to sense a deeper rhythm, a silent wisdom humming beneath everything. The Stoics called it logos, the rational order of the universe. It's not a myth or a metaphor. It's something you begin to feel the more you let go. A quiet intelligence guiding things. Not in your favor or against you, but through you. With you. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this shaping in me? You stop trying to bend the world toward your will and begin shaping your will in harmony with the world. And slowly, you become the kind of person who can hold joy without needing to possess it, who can walk through pain without becoming it, who can be trusted with stillness, because you no longer fear what it reveals. This is the quiet power the Stoics spoke of, not dominance, not escape, but embodiment. You embody presence. You embody principle. You embody peace. And what you embody expands, not just within you, but around you. Your life becomes a field, not a fortress. People come to rest in your steadiness. Opportunities gravitate toward your clarity. Even challenges approach you differently, because you no longer react with fear, but with understanding. And what once felt like work, patience, discipline, virtue, becomes your way of breathing. You are no longer practicing stoicism. You are it. Quietly. Naturally. Unapologetically. Not to impress. Not to ascend. But because it is the most honest way to live. The most whole. The most free. And in that freedom, you continue. not chasing, not controlling, not striving, but walking. One clear step at a time. In harmony. In truth. In peace. The story unfolds. And so do you.